Happy Monday. Thank you for joining me for this week's Unlocking the Magic of Leadership. Now, this week we are looking at all 5 of the keys. So we have manage yourself first, align your purpose, galvanize your employees, inspire yourself and others, and control your chaos. Now, the reason why we are going to be touching on all 5 of the keys is because we're talking about trust. Now, trust is one of those big words that if I am having a conversation with you and I say, you know what, I don't trust you, we're going to feel a certain way about that one. That one's going to hit harder than maybe some of the other words, but it never fails. I talk about trust in all of the week-long leadership training programs that I do. And in that conversation, I will ask people, how do you define trust? People will give me examples of when trust has been broken, but to actually define trust is hard. And that's because it means different things for different people. And I was recently having this conversation in one of the training programs. And in that conversation, this phrase came up and it immediately like zinged. It hit all of our brains really hard. And that phrase is that trust is neither built nor repaired in silence. Let that sit for one moment. Trust is neither built nor repaired in silence. But how often, when trust is broken, do we ignore it, not talk about it to everybody but the person that broke the silence, broke the trust? In this silence, damage is done. And as leaders, we have a responsibility to not live in that silence. When someone who reports to us has broken that trust, we have a responsibility to have that conversation with them. And so when we think about trust, the Reina Trust Institute breaks trust down into 3 buckets. You have the trust of capability, the trust of character, and the trust of communication. So I really like that model because it helps us break down this really big, nebulous, heavy concept into something that as leaders, we can actually do something with. So when we think about trust of capability, can the person do the job that I'm asking them to do? Now, if I have somebody that has been with the company for 5 years, knows everything about their part of the business, I probably have pretty high trust of capability. If I have an intern that it's their first week, I probably have pretty low trust of capability. Doesn't mean I don't trust the person. It means we're still figuring out what they are capable of. Now, when this trust can get broken is somebody applies for a position where they need to be able to do exceptional PowerPoints, and within week 1 or 2 after their training is done, I'm like, hey, could you build me a PowerPoint? And it comes back not looking at the level of an expert user of PowerPoint. So trust of capability, it's one bucket. Can they do the job? Now, trust of communication is another bucket. When we think about trust of communication, if I have a conversation with you, are you going to repeat that conversation? If I share something with you that is not meant to be repeated, and I specifically say, please don't share this, am I going to hear the chatter around the office? Could be that I share something with you and ask you to share it with your team. Does it come across as authentic? Or are you, all right, everybody, so, corporate has asked us to do this. I'm not really on board, but I believe we talked about that a few weeks ago. Blaming corporate or blaming headquarters or blaming the manager, whatever that looks like. So trust of communication is how are you communicating? Is it authentic? Is it honest communication? And are you able to keep what is told to you in confidence? Because another area of trust that Brene Brown brought this up, and it was a really interesting concept, that if you and I are sitting down and we're having coffee and we're having a great time and I'm like, ooh, did you hear about Beth? She is getting a divorce and let me tell you, it is ugly. In that moment, we may feel like we're bonding. But then when we get done talking, you're probably going to find yourself thinking, I wonder if she talks about me and my business like that. So that's part of trust of communication as well. And then the third and final bucket is trust of character. So if I ask you to do something and you say yes, are you actually going to do it? Are you able to set boundaries? Do you stick to those boundaries? Do you respect others' boundaries? And then the big trust of character, like, are you honest? Are you not going to take office supplies home, stuff like that? Now, when trust has been broken, because we are human, we are not perfect, relationships are built in those moments of imperfection. So when it happens, how are you going to handle that conversation? What is that going to look like? Are you going to go in and be like, well, I guess I was just wrong for trusting you. I knew I shouldn't have done it. Or are you going to go in and say, hey, so-and-so, on Thursday, I asked you to do this. The work you turned in didn't match up what the expectation was. Can we have a conversation about that? Are you going to put it on the table and then allow the person the opportunity to join in the conversation? Or are you going to go in with your mind already made up? You know what? That person, completely writing them off. They told me they could do something. Obviously, they couldn't do it. When we're talking about trust, it is a two-way street. If trust has been broken, it's opening up the door and then allowing the person to step through it and say, yes, that wasn't my best work. Or I'd really like to get better. Understanding how you can continue the conversation. Trust is not built or repaired in silence. So when things go sideways, have conversations about it. If you're not sure how to have the conversation, reach out. I would love, love, love. One of my biggest purposes in life is to be able to better have difficult conversations. There we go. I knew we'd get there. It just took a second. All right. So that is everything that we are going to be talking about for this week's Unlocking the Magic of Leadership. Thank you for tuning in to this week's message. Hope you found some value out of it. And don't forget, as always, if you're watching me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. If it's an email, you want to have a conversation, reply to the email, or if it's in social media, drop some stuff on the comments. I love hearing from y'all and see every single message that you send. So thank you very much for that. Have an amazing week. And as always, don't forget, you got this. I'll see you next week.